Well, my name is Jeff Davis, and I'm with the Horsley Wooden Group. We're one of the sub-consultants working on this project for the town. We are joined, as you know, by Kate Maldonado, who is an employee of the planning department. Kate, before we get started, are you note taking for us today?
Yes, I can. I've got it ready to go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we have a relatively limited amount of time to go over a lot of big ideas. But what we have here, six of you. So I think that's actually a really good number. We should have enough time for everyone to share their piece. So because we are a smaller group, I would love to start with introductions. Um, if you just give your name, maybe the village where you live or the closest village to where you live, and maybe one, two, three words about something that you really care about in the community. Why did you choose to be here today? Was the thing that made you log in today? Um, and for the sake of efficiency, I'm just gonna call names out in the order in which I see you on my screen. So let us start with Jennifer Phillips. Oh, and you're muted, Jennifer.
Hi, nice to be with you. I am in Comaquid. And I guess the two things on my mind are preserving open space, particularly or including open space that is privately owned, giving some incentive to people to preserve green space. And second of all, maybe to think about rebalancing historical preservation with sustainable energy, specifically solar panels, because it seems really important to Cape Cod. We do both. So those are on my mind.
Hey, thank you so much, Jennifer. Next person on my screen is Lindsay Council.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm from Centerville and also a member of the local comprehensive planning committee. The reason I get involved in all of this is to really protect those resources that were mentioned so many times in these discussions. It's Cape Cod's a very fragile place, and having lived here as long as I have, you really see the impact that mismanaged growth can have. So, very important discussions, and I look forward to getting to some of the harder questions of when do we reach our limits here for certain types of growth, and tricky questions of what improvements really can be made to our road system to make it more user friendly. And some pretty innovative things are going on right now, like in Hyannis with the street study there. So it's all very exciting, and not only are we planning for the future, but there are things moving forward that'll really impact us.
Absolutely.
Such as
Thank
the
you so
sewer
much.
expansion. So
Appreciate you joining us from the committee. Next is Jennifer Williams.
So glad to be with everyone here today. Jennifer Williams, Village of Osterville. I'm the director of the Osterville Historical Museum, run the Osterville Farmers Market, also a member of the LCPC. And I love history. And I love all the resources that Lindsay spoke of. I think we're all connected by the water, and it is such a valuable and fragile piece of our Cape Cod story. And I'm also, here because of the people who live here. It's because of our community, because of those people who support our villages, support the town of Barnstable, and support the preservation of such valuable resources that we're all lucky enough to have here. So that's sort of my short intro to where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Jennifer Williams. I'll have to, like in elementary school, and say Jennifer P and Jennifer W.
There you go.
Next on my screen is Paul Nichols.
Hi, yes, I'm Paul Nichols from Hyannis. I built a house there about a year ago. I'm probably a little bit different than many in the group, in so much as I live part-time in Hyannis. So I vacationed to the Cape for 40 years, 45 years. And we finally decided to build a house down there, and we've lived there for about a year now. And I think one thing that to me maybe maybe having a little bit different perspective is just the importance of the connectivity of the harbor to the main street of Hyannis, and just recognizing how unique that is compared to other cities throughout the country, really, and really preserving and somehow making that more connective, I think, is an important thing instead of two distinct areas, if you will.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And yes, a very common story over the last few years. People who have vacationed here for years and setting down roots here. So welcome.
Thank you.
Next on my screen is Francis Parks. Oh, you are you're muted.
I'm from Katuitt. I grew up in Katuitt. I attended Barnstable schools. I'm a member of the Town of Barnstable Historical Commission, and I'm also the chairman of the Katuitt Fire District Prudential Committee. I'm concerned about, like Lindsay, growth. I've watched it all my life, and I think there's, the town needs to be ready for an endpoint, because we can't continue to, for all of Cape Cod, just constantly build more houses and have more people. And I'm also concerned about the waterways and our public drinking water. Those are my major concerns. And I'm a member of the LCPC committee.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Thomas Bauer.
Hello, I'm Tom Bauer, and I'm here because my wife told me I needed to be on this call. But we are longtime residents of Hyannisport in the along the avenues. I think the things that I'm most interested in is very similar to what we're hearing from some of the others, which I'm very much into. We're very much into the green aspects of this. So that means the parks and the beaches and the recreation, but as well as the recycling, garbage, things along those lines. Second thing that probably I'm most interested in is traffic and safety. Bike lanes, we're seeing more people actually going for walks and not as many sidewalks and things like that. So, looking at those kinds of things.
Great. Well, thank you for those introductions. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see the 2010 Barnstable LCP vision?
Yes.
All right, great. So Dylan had read this to you earlier. I won't reread it to you, but we've got about 10 minutes. Again, big conversations in a relatively compressed amount of time, but about 10 minutes to talk about this vision. We want to hear from you as to whether you think it's still generally accurate. Are there community priorities? Which of the community priorities are most important? And we're going to try to get an understanding of what things have changed over the last 13 years that aren't really reflected in this vision, if any. What you want Barnstable to be like in 10 or 20 years, what challenging decisions might the community face in the future, and what should the vision say to provide guidance on future decisions. So this is a lot to cover in 10 minutes. I don't expect us to go necessarily question by question, otherwise we would never get through all of this in 10 minutes. But let's just start with the vision itself. How do people feel about that? Is it generally on target? Is there anything that you feel is missing about this vision? And feel free to, I think we're a small enough group that, if we each take turns and just unmute yourself when you'd like to speak. I'd like to make this as free-flowing a conversation as possible. Yes, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jeff. I think this is a little general for this period in time for the town. I think we actually, with the help of many folks like Francis on the historic committee, reached many of these goals. But I think the one area that we really haven't addressed is balancing growth with these other infrastructure. If you were to do that, our infrastructure currently is totally maxed out. So and whether that be roads, capability of water, delivery, as well as management of rainwater, stormwater, and those kinds of things. So these are tough questions. There is so much that needs to be done for what we have now. How do you measure and quantify where you manage growth based on the ground information we have today, for example? So very interesting questions, but ones that really have to be addressed a bit more firmly than this plan did.
Okay, so that issue of balancing growth and infrastructure, a major theme you'd like to see improved in this update to the plan. Other folks?
I would think, Jeff, that telecommunication infrastructure is certainly that needs to evolve to the next level. You know, connectivity in terms of Wi-Fi at whether it's public or private places at your home. It just seems it's a little fiber. You know, is at least to my knowledge isn't really available in too many places on the Cape. So I think kind of taking that next leap is going to be critically important in this next plan.
Okay, the issue of technology, telecommunication, and connectivity, particularly for people who are working remotely or just connecting to the outside world in general, a really important aspect to invest in. Okay, thank you, Paul. Yes, Francis.
I'd like to see the town, particularly the schools, spend more time on educating the students about their town, which is what was done when I was in grammar school and beyond. And you know, I don't think there's that much of it today. And I think the history of Cotuit of the town of Barnstable is important. And I think if you want to have, you know, well-rounded citizens, that's one thing that should be stressed. I also think, along with Lindsay, that, you know, we need to, you know, really concentrate on our resources, protecting our resources, particularly the water and the waterways, which are, you know, in terrible shape. And I think that's probably the most important thing for the town to be doing at this point in time.
Great. So that issue of education about the town's history, and just building a better citizenry, you know, taking time to invest in civics lessons in the schools, but throughout the community. And then that reiteration of environmental resources and making sure that we're protecting what we have remaining. Great. Who else? Please go ahead.
If I may.
Yes, Jennifer P.
I would love to see, as part of the combination of community character, quality of life, and growth, some real intentionality about managing our automobiles. I think, you know, working with the state to maybe lower and regularize the speed on 6A would be hugely important, but also maybe being intentional about places you can get out of your car and walk. You know, parking is at such a premium in Barnstable. I frequently drive by places that I think, oh, it would be great. It's a beautiful day. I'd love to go for a walk. There's nowhere to put the car and keep on driving. So just kind of thinking about more places that we can get our cars out of our way and make proceeding on foot or on wheels, if necessary, easier would, I think, really affect a number of these areas.
Great. So connectivity and mobility issues from managing transportation, automobile transportation, to really increasing walkability and connectivity. We talked about connectivity in terms of telecommunications, but also physically being able to walk or bicycle from place to place and reduce that need for roadways and parking. Wonderful. Thank you.
I'll jump in here. I think I agree with what everybody's said so far. It's so difficult. There's so many issues and they're so interrelated. I think that the 2010 vision is broad and sort of general, and for me a little bit flat. That I'm looking for more of the people power and the people loving to live here, work here, raise their families here. The small businesses that thrive and the people and sort of the resources. And it talks a little bit about quality of life within the villages, but what resources those people need. And I think that we are at a different place, obviously, from 2010, having gone through our pandemic years and coming out of that. And I guess I'm more on the aspirational, inspirational side of things, looking for a sort of a flourishing call to action of what it is that we love about the village that we're in, the villages together, and sort of honing in on that a little bit more, the people aspect of life.
Wonderful. I think that's something that we've heard from other people on the committee as well, that this effort should focus on people. If you do a people-focused plan, then everything else falls under that. And I think that is a very important distinction. I will say, facilitator goof, I moved directly to slide 3 when I should have started you off on slide 2. So we actually have a lot more time to talk about this topic. Would love to hear from, I think we're missing one person who's not spoken yet, and then I do want to go back to slide number 2 and ask some other questions. We will come back to this one. My apologies, facilitator bad, but thank you, Jennifer W, for that comment. So anyone else have any initial thoughts on the vision statement?
And this is Tom. So I agree with what everybody's saying too. And I think the hard part of something like this is a vision statement is usually a very broad statement that has, as you see, it takes up one slide, one big sentence. So I think it's kind of hard to kind of put all of those things in there. Where do we put that emphasis then, whether it was on the environment or on the education or on the the balancing of infrastructure resources? Somehow there needs to be a sentence in there or two that really kind of drive towards where that vision is, I think, in my opinion.
Great. So that's an important point of not having just a laundry list of ideas, but how do you consolidate that into a cohesive vision? And yes, I'll take a question from Francis, and then I want to go back to our previous slide.
I have a couple of things. One, I'd like to say about the whole process prior to this. Each village got together and developed in the village their own contribution, as opposed to condensing it all together. And I think that was better. And I think that you're going to get better ideas about how each village functions and what they need doing it that way. And now I'm going to speak some heresy. I think a vision plan is nice for some people. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think when somebody looks at the long-term plan, the first thing they're going to do is read the vision statement and, then go into the plan and see if you stuck by it. I think a lot of work is going into something that is probably the least important part of the whole plan, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm an old person, and I understand that this is probably a requirement of the Cape Cod Commission, but I just find it superfluous.
That is not heresy, and there are plenty of people in the planning community who would agree with you. There are varied opinions on the value of a vision statement, for sure. So that is a valid point. So we will come back to the vision, rest assured. But I want to go back take a step and look at the key themes that we heard from engagement. Again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we did want to make sure that we covered whether or not this summary of what we've been hearing from all the different community members that staff has been going out and talking to, all those great things that James mentioned in his portion of the presentation. Do these summaries sound generally accurate? Is there anything missing? And I want to have a little conversation about what community priorities are the most important. And so I think this gets back to I think what Tom was saying, where we have a lot of different community priorities that have been thrown out there by the public. And which of them do you think are most important? Like, list your top one or two. And then as a group, would love to brainstorm what you think are the 3 to 5 core community values that have arisen from the feedback we've gotten from the public so far. So any thoughts on this? Of all the things that have been reported back on, what do you think is the most important? And we've got protect water quality, protect environmental resources, preserve and enhance tree canopy, protect and enhance tourist appeal, preserve diverse community character, unique to each village, preserve historic structures, expand housing options, reduce traffic congestion, provide more opportunities for children and families, create more year-round employment opportunities, improve safety in village centers, and improve health and human services, foster opportunities to form community connections, that people-based thing, getting to know your neighbors, and increase proactive communication and transparency from town government. And so, to be clear, all of these things will be included in the plan. They must be. But what do you think are the highest priorities? And Lindsay.
Thank you. I think the top two are still the top two. If you wanted to choose just a couple, I think many of the things are being worked on and could be enhanced. Preserving tree canopy. With the town's complete street program, I think we're doing a lot to improve our streets, and the rest of them fall into place. Many overlapping. So, again, I think those two would be my choices.
Okay, thank you. Water quality and environmental resources. Other folks, your top priorities from this list.
This is Tom. So I'm all on board with the protecting the water quality in all forms as well. So that's big. I don't know what the Cape, the Cape's been around for a long time. So what kind of lead pipe situation you might be having, or any of those kinds of drinking water is so key. And I would hate to see Barnstable to become another Jackson, Mississippi, or something on those lines. So that to me is like, really want to avoid that kind of stuff. The other thing is the gentleman who brought up the technology aspect. I think back in 2010, there wasn't as much technology as there is now, and it's probably going to, in 10 or 20 years, going to even expand more. So the whole broadband or fiber optics, or what makes us so unique here that we're become a city of choice because of what we've done with our technology infrastructure, I think is important. And maybe that goes into the foster opportunities to form community connections.
I'll jump in. I think first two I would probably also choose. With regard to technology, I had a conversation in Verizon in the store with a problem about a phone, and was told that Verizon has laid fiber optic, state-of-the-art cable down the whole Cape, but because of competition agreements with Comcast, has not activated them. And therefore, Comcast has no competition, and Comcast is inferior to every other service I've had living in other places earlier in life. So I'm not sure we can solve that in the town of Barnstable, but we may be able to weigh in on it with the corporate I do think we can do a lot for our water and our green space, the things that bring people to the Cape. So those would be my priorities.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Francis.
I agree. The first two, protect water quality, protect the environment. And I would go preserve the diverse community character that is unique to each village, which each village is truly unique. I think enhance tourist appeal and reduce traffic congestion are sort of two, diametrically opposed. If you do one, you're going to worsen the other. So.
Great. Thank you, Francis. And I think we have yet to hear from Jennifer W.
I know. I'll jump in again. I completely agree. Obviously everything on this list is very important, but without the first two, protecting the water, again, in all forms, not only the bays and the harbors, but our drinking water. If we lose that, the rest, is sort of following along in suit. I think also it's equally important to preserve the character of each village, that together that character of each individual village forms Barnstable. And that's what's so great about Barnstable is each one of our villages. But I can't emphasize enough the water quality and our beautiful resources that we have here within the town of Barnstable. So important.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Lindsay, I see your hand up, but I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to weigh in before we go back. Anyone else have priorities that they would like to add? Anyone who has not spoken yet?
I think I'd just add, Jeff, if I could, just, to further expand on obviously water, you certainly can't argue that, but I think infrastructure is very important, road, water, sewer. I mean, it's not the most fun to talk about water lines and plumbing systems and everything else and sidewalks, but, I've certainly seen through parts I've worked and lived throughout the country. It's just, those things go until there's an emergency and then nobody knows what to do. And it's just, I think, keeping up with those systems and a lot of like the sidewalks and the curbing and all of that stuff. There's just, it's just stuff that can't be ignored.
I think everyone's had a chance to weigh in. So Lindsay, anything else to add?
Yes, just one quick thing. We need to look at what measures we're going to use to prioritize the items within these categories. And then be sure to put in this plan. If you set these things as priorities, you have some measure of how you succeeded going forward. And I think for some of these areas, we're talking about broad things. This is talked about as a 10-year plan. I think it needs to be more on the lines of 12 or 15 because town cycles seem to run on like a 3-year plan. So you really need some plan to implement and then measure how well you did, because that's where these plans fall off. Staff had to do a ton of time to go back and try to figure out what we had done from the previous plan. So we do need to put those in as a key component of this.
Great. So yes, building in performance standards so you can be measuring as you go and know what success looks like and when you've gotten there. All right. So it seems like there was pretty general consensus that water quality, environmental resources were your top two issues, followed pretty closely by infrastructure, not only technology infrastructure, but all sorts of infrastructure that keep the town functioning, as well as the community character of each village. And again, not to say that the other things are not important or will not be addressed. Obviously, they all will. Right. But those seem to be the things that rose to the top for this group. How much time do we have? We've got 17 minutes. All right, cool. So this might be a little challenging, but the last piece for this slide is what are the community values underlying these priorities? And And this can be something that is easy to pontificate on, and you can get wax poetic about what this means. But if you can, try to think of 3 to 5 words that really describe, okay, if water quality, environmental resources, infrastructure, the uniqueness and character of each community village are our priorities. What are sort of the underlying values that suggests? So just some words off the top of your head, and this will help us shape a vision statement. What are some of the words that describe those priorities for you? And again, just think of a word off the top of your head.
I'd start with clean, sustainable, and connected.
Clean, sustainable, connected. Awesome.
I think of
That's very
stewardship,
good.
that we're here not just for the current here and now, but for the future, and that we have a responsibility to maintain and keep things clean and connected.
Excellent. Stewardship. Are there words that pop in your head to describe these priorities that we were just discussing?
Balance.
Balance.
Preservation.
Preservation.
For future generations.
Future generations.
Proactive.
Proactive. Good. Love it. This is a good list. Clean, sustainable, connected, stewardship, balance, preservation, future generations, proactive. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So our next 15 minutes, let us go back to slide 3 and continue this conversation about the vision. So we've talked a little bit about what you want Barnstable to be like in 10 or even 20 years, into Lindsay's point that this should look even farther out into the future. Let's talk about some of the challenges that you might expect the community to face over the next 10 or 20 years that this plan should perhaps try to get out in front of.
I think we're seeing it right now with the pardon me, the building of high-rise condominiums on Barnstable Harbor, which is at the last open place on Barnstable Harbor where people can go actually see the harbor. The same for the golf course on the west end in Hyannis. That's going to be filled with housing. And I think those are both concerning decisions because it's going to make the traffic in Hyannis much, much worse than it already is. And I'm not sure that it's particularly that the quote working force housing on the golf course is actually going to be serving the workforce, because I think it's going to end up just being, people who want to move to the Cape will come down here and snap those up, and we're still going to be in the same housing problem that we've always been in.
Okay, so that future issue of continued, this is something that many of you have brought up, the impacts of development into the future. Other folks, things that you expect to be challenges for the town over the next 10 to 20 years.
I'm aware, I live in a neighborhood where just about all of my abutting neighbors are very elderly. And a couple of people who have green space are considering selling it for development because they can no longer afford the taxes and the cost of living here, but they don't want to move. So I think figuring out our demographic, how seriously limited incomes are going to weigh in as people get older, and the need to preserve character of communities while dealing with those constraining factors is important.
And talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by the character of the community in the context of an aging population.
Well, particularly, I think, everybody on my street, we are very mutually supportive, cares a great deal about preserving the water and the green space of the Cape, and have done so all their lives. But are finding it, a couple of them are finding it more difficult to sustain their particular pieces of green space on behalf of the wider community, given that people are feeling more and more economic pinch. So I don't see that changing in the short term. Older people and a harsher economy for many of them, and the decisions that necessitates.
Thank you. Yes, that aging population and the impacts that has on the overall community and the economy, and people's ability to participate in the preservation and upkeep of the community. So other folks, concerns over the next 10, 20 years?
Yes, if I could go, Jeff.
Yes,
just
sir.
One major one that just popped into my mind was the completing the Water Resources Management Plan. We've done a good job with nutrients, particularly in the south side of Barnstable. We need a complete town-wide plan that takes in all the villages, and to determine how we're going to fund that. We're going to go along and do Proposition 2.5 overrides, or are we going to have a whole plan in place that involves everyone in town? Because I mean, we're one town, and in certain parts of town they may never see sewer, but they should be part of the system, I think, and everyone should be get benefit, and also help share the cost, because it is a town-wide issue.
Yeah, that is definitely a town-wide issue and a long-term issue, and something that you're right. You absolutely have to crack that nut if you're going to succeed as a community.
That's right, and yeah, I think there's benefit in doing these things community-wide, economy of scale, and folks that may not be able to afford some of these improvements. We have DEP coming out with these new regulations for Title V, and we've got to sort that out and how that fits in with our wastewater plan, and to make sure that those folks are taken care of. There is a good program through the county, but a lot of these people have limited access to these sites and these offices. So we got to make sure that it's a comprehensive plan that includes everybody.
Fantastic. Other major concerns you want to make sure the comprehensive plan is addressing?
I'll jump in. I think healthcare issues. We talked about an aging population. Hard to get a primary care physician on Cape Cod, and the waiting lists are quite high. And we know a number of terrific doctors are retiring or moving elsewhere. And I think dealing with that as medical technologies get more involved and more advanced, being able to tap into those advanced resources here on Cape Cod for people who may not be able to travel to Boston or elsewhere for needed medical support. And also the issue of attracting young families to Barnstable. Again, a place where we're thinking about generations and sort of the future coming up as well, and how to make this a place that families continue to enjoy and not just live and work, but actually flourish and go beyond sort of those basics, not having to struggle so much to think about jobs or educational opportunities.
can I just maybe add in as a sort of footnote concern about the bridges and the kind of collapse of the decision or the grant to move forward with the renovation of our two bridges. I'm really aware 1930s structures, metal fatigue. I come from a family of scientists. The bridges are in bad shape, and now it looks like there might not be another plan for 10 years to replace them. And that can't disappear from our consciousness.
Yeah, that goes back to the conversation earlier about infrastructure. And my goodness, being where you are, those bridges are really, really critical to your infrastructure. Absolutely.
Hearing all this, balancing resources and how are we going to prioritize? I feel like I'm nodding my head on every speaker who says something. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that makes a lot of sense, and that. How are we going to balance the resources that we have to cover the things that we're pointing out, and which ones are going to be prioritized? I think that's going to be a huge challenge to overcome.
I think I think one of the ways to deal with it is not depend on the town government so much as to, each particular village or, local people in Hyannisport to get together as a group and concentrate on their local problems and then present it to the town. I think that's a more advantageous way to see if you can get something done. But I don't think, I live in Katuitt, and we're, the end of the earth as far as a lot of people are concerned. And so we've become very self-sufficient. But I think you can get a lot more done by the town if you approach them with an organized, well thought out plan for whatever you think your section of the town needs.
All right, so our last 5 minutes are supposed to be dedicated, and I will stop sharing my screen so we can more easily see each other. Oops. Apologies, I'm having the worst time with my screen today. Seriously, after how many years have I been using Zoom? And it is doing some weird things on my screen today that I cannot figure out. Okay, never mind. I don't know, like I can figure this out right now, and it's not worth it, and we only have 4 minutes left now. So apologies, you're gonna continue to see my screen until we're moved back to the main room. So our last activity for the last 5 minutes, based on what we have talked about, we want you to tell me in as few words as possible the biggest ideas that the vision should address. So we talked about these key words, these key terms that describe the priorities of the community. Any other big thoughts, big ideas for what the vision should address? So Tom, you mentioned the issue of balancing resources, and I think that's actually a key example to kick off this discussion. What should we build into that vision?
Yeah, I think we're going to somehow. I maybe it's some kind of prioritization of items. I think that to me is the biggest thing. So whether and it seems that we're all in agreement that water and in some way, some form or fashion is really the key thing. So does that need to be almost spelled out in some way?
I think what Lindsay was saying earlier about having, goals, but metrics on how do we know that we've attained those goals. And also the issue of balance when Francis was saying both, the villages bringing their voice together with the town, but on the other hand, the balance of, economies of scale, as Lindsay was saying, about, working together to use whatever resources we have to get the best deal in the end for everybody. And another issue of balance.
Yeah, and this was brought up also by Francis, that there seems to be a tension in a good way between making hyper-localized decisions at the village scale and working together as a whole town. And I think there's room for both, depending on the issues you're trying to tackle.
One thought I had that we sort of didn't catch, but was the one that was echoed in different ways in different presentation I've seen, but transparency in government. I think COVID taught us a lot of things, and one thing was that Zoom and these types of things seem to reach out to more diverse residents and interested people than in public meetings. So, I really hope we can sustain a hybrid type of situation, because the more people know about what government's doing, get involved, the better.
Thank you, and that's a good thing to bring up. It's one of those overarching issues that really affects everything we've been talking about. So thank you for that. And we should be going back to the main room any second now, but anyone else? Big picture ideas that we should make sure are reflected in the vision.
I think we need to make improve downtown Hyannis so that it's not just focused on tourists. It's a place where anybody who lives in the town would want to go for, dress shopping or shoes or jewelry or art or everyday needs, to run the house, which is no longer available on Hyannis Main Street. And I think that would, revitalize the street.
Are we done?
Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you.
Our group was a sprint to the end, and somebody got cut off, which I always feel bad about in these Zoom meetings. So sorry about that, Raquel. So what we're going to do now is share some of what we all talked about in our groups, and see how much commonality or difference there is amongst them. Are any of the facilitators feeling like well prepared to do a report out right now?
I am, Dylan, because
Excellent.
we wrote it down on the slides.
Excellent.
If you don't mind me.
Could you fix the Zoom so that we can see everybody who's here? I'd love to be able to see everybody.
Yeah, so if you go and that's controlled on your end. If you go in the upper right corner of your screen, at least on my screen.
Oh, okay. Now it just appeared. It wasn't there. Okay, thank you.
So this is group number 2. We sort of had really good discussion and then tried to list the priorities. And of course, when you list them, you lose a lot of the nuance that people talk about. So we have more in the notes, but obviously a lot of these reflect what we've been talked about, but really with a focus on people as the sort of purpose of the planning process. And so whether it's protecting the environment as the basis of an economy and quality of life that serves the population, enhancing social services, we talked a lot about the need for that, and then public transportation as sort of being fundamental to quality of life for all different populations. And then an interesting conversation about the importance of really building on historic resources, and more than just talking about we need to protect our quaintness and charm of Cape Cod, but really trying to understand the utility of that and how, specifically those resources impact economy, quality of life, and so on, and really working intentionally to protect those resources. We talked about an economy that needs to serve the people in Barnstable, is particularly allowing people who work in that economy to be able to live there. That was so important. We wrote it twice. And then including underrepresented voices in the process, which we just sort of started talking about what that means in terms of people of color, indigenous populations, and so on. But obviously there's a lot to talk about there. And then we talked about sort of the values that underlie these priorities, which, as we discussed, is sort of the flip side of this is what we want to do, and the values sort of represent why we want to do it. So build systems serving the community systems and the natural systems. So really thinking about what kind of infrastructure we need, not just to make traffic flow better, but really to look at everything through the perspective of what enhances the life of the community and protects the environment. And to really focus again on the balance between people and the environment, to focus on the interconnectedness of people and the environment, not separate parts of this plan, but really integrated parts of it. Making decisions based on long-term sustainability, even though that adds a lot of complexity and cost, perhaps, to the planning process as well as the implementation. And then to include all communities in planning just as a value, that being fundamental to making a good plan and implementing a good plan. And then we talked about what flows from that is the value of focusing on small local businesses, encouraging young people and families, and local creators. And then we started to talk about a little bit what the focus of the vision is, and I think for most in our group, probably some combination of all of these things, but it was mentioned that sustainability really needs to be the touchstone for the plan. Even it was obviously written as part of the 2010 plan, but now is really a good opportunity to look again as what does that mean in terms of the economy, in terms of the environment, in terms of the social structure and support systems in the community. And then obviously building resilience in the face of climate change has become much more important in the last 13 years. Does that capture everything from our group? I know it doesn't capture everything, but more or less.
Excellent job, Peter.
All right. Back to you, Bill.
I think I'll go next. I didn't follow my own directions and write things down in the slide. So my report out's a little messier than that. So we had a very interesting conversation. I think in terms of the priorities that I heard, water quality came out very strongly as a priority. Protecting open space, preserving open space, protecting the environment in general also was mentioned. Somebody in the conversation said that basically the full left side of that slide that showed the key themes were really the most important things. And those were basically all about environmental protection, I think, as well as protection of existing character of villages. Another topic that we talked a lot about was housing, the need for housing for all types of people, basically. Housing for older adults, housing for young families, making sure that there's housing so that there are opportunities for people who work in the town to live in the town so that your economy can continue to survive and thrive. A priority that came up was the need to be a green community, by which I think people were meant, responding to climate change, mitigating climate change through things like green energy and recycling and solar panels and EV charging stations. So it's similar to the idea of sustainability that was in the last master plan, but I think getting more specific about what the town can be doing on an individual and on a community basis to sort of reduce your environmental footprint. And then we also talked about as a priority, the need for redevelopment versus development. So redeveloping existing built areas as opposed to developing in undeveloped areas. The values that seem to underlie those things were, care for the environment, care for other species, and so forth, protection or maintenance of human health, providing opportunities for everybody, and then caring for other people, which came up towards the end of the conversation, particularly around the sense of a lack of safety in downtown Hyannis, and how that needed to be addressed to care for the people who are making other people feel safe, and also making sure that people can feel safe in downtown Hyannis. In terms of the vision, when we talked about the vision, we talked a lot about redevelopment versus development. And so there's strong support for preserving villages. And then the idea of redeveloping areas along your more major corridors, and specifically kind of transforming those into more walkable, mixed use, I suppose, village center like places. So somebody talked about having housing above stores, making it easier to walk around and so forth, and cited Mashpee Commons as a potential model for that. All right, that's my summary. I'm going to call on Carly.
Hi, Dylan. I'll do the report out. Carly did a
Okay.
great job facilitating our group. Okay, so for the community priorities and community values, some things that people just wanted to make sure was included, and I think they were, but I have under the is anything missing? Climate change, human services, community character, and transportation infrastructure came to mind as things to make sure we're keeping in mind. Looking ahead for the coming decades, our group was interested in neighborhood life, residents living next to each other, and how that dynamic changes with Airbnbs and short-term rentals, which led to a conversation that was kind of woven throughout. Our discussion was feeling strongly that the vision should somehow help guide the town forward in a way that kind of is able to think through impacts of things that maybe aren't anticipated from past experiences, such as how the dynamic might change with a decision of short-term rentals or a new bridge or technology, how that affects different characteristics of the town. They also, a high priority is human services and taking care of the people that live in Barnstable. And then under the community vision, it was really interesting. I think one reaction was it's boring, and the other, and the same person, often the same people might have agreed with the other, is that it does describe the character of a community that is worth preserving. So maybe getting, just revamping it, getting more detailed, thinking through some of the major future changes and what the impacts to the town are, so the town can be ready to respond to the impacts. What has changed since 2010 that the new vision should address, and that's where technology came up. It also affects higher wage jobs in a good way, and the economy. So trying to think ahead toward what the next 10 or 20 years will bring and what different aspects of community that will affect. In terms of what the group would like Barnstable to be like in 10 or 20 years, for the environment, dealing with the effects of climate change are going to lead to some very difficult decisions about what to let go or what to reinforce. And the acknowledgement of the community needing to make some very difficult decisions came up under other topics as well, sort of a trade-off of priorities and different pressing issues. Also, it came in terms of development. There's not much land to build upon. Looking into redevelopment was expressed of interest. More access to transportation, more options on the Cape, easier access to Boston so people could still live in Barnstable but work elsewhere. Need to address human services. There was a desire to have some kind of school or college that would bring students to the Cape and allow them to live and work there after. Mixed income housing in not only Hyannis, but all the villages. Housing decisions on how the town moves forward and how villages are going to be effective with the need for more housing. And they wish the vision statement would say that the town, represents the people, and is enveloped around the interests of their, the residents. Principles or values that could be included in the vision: better overall urban design, street trees, planning for connection between residential areas, open space to downtown Hyannis. They thought Cotuit urban design was pretty good. What would the vision need to say to inspire you? So we kind of summarized, the synthesizes that housing for all, planning for climate change, developing policies to guide urban design and connectivity, continuing to cultivate community character and preservation, consider the interrelated impacts of decisions, sustainable year-round education opportunities and economic growth. And the group really values their beautiful, wonderful community and their wish for that all citizens have sustainable and healthy lives. That is all.
Thanks, Jill. Alexis, I have to keep it as brief as possible because we're getting close to the end of our time together.
So I was actually with Peter.
Oh.
I think Jeff's group.
Jeff's group, sorry.
All right, and I can be very quick and not to give short shrift to my group because we were awesome. We had great conversations and covered a lot of the things that have been mentioned already. So I will keep it very high level. One of the things we encouraged everyone to do was think of some keywords. So in terms of the top priorities, water quality, environmental resources, infrastructure, and that's both technological and hard infrastructure, roads, bridges, as well as the community character at each village level. Some of the key words that our group discussed was a future that is connected, sustainable, clean, balanced, preservation, stewardship, focus on future generations, and a plan that is proactive. And then lastly, I will also say some of the key themes that the group would like to see reflected in not only the vision, but the plan overall is a concept of balance, balancing resources, balancing the need to focus on villages as well as town-wide direction. How do we prioritize all of these issues? Because they're all important and we want to do them all, but how do we prioritize? How do we involve performance metrics so that we know what we've achieved and what we've achieved success, and really continuing with this concept of transparency in government. And that is my 30-second spiel. Of course, there was a lot more discussed than that.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so I wanted to thank you all for coming today. The next step for this is we're going to have basically the same meeting over again tomorrow in person. So you all don't need to come to that, but you're welcome to if you want to do it all over again. And after that, we're going to basically summarize the input that we heard and bring that to the steering committee for this project. I see several of the members of that group here today, and go over it with them and start to flesh out what the vision should be. So we'll be primarily working with them to do that. So again, thank you for your time. And I see one person raise their hand. Ken, do you want to say something?
Listening to this, it's frightening. There is a gigantic bag of ideas, thoughts, missions, whatever. To me, a vision statement needs to be succinct. It needs to be clear, and it needs to be encouraging. And I just see what has been said has just been so much. It's impossible to cover it all, and everything will lead to something else worse happening. So I hate to be such a pessimist about this, but I've done this for too long. Sorry.
All right. Well, on that sad note.
Sorry.
Hopefully we can pull it all together and make it into something that's concise and inspiring and cogent. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Don't feel bad, Ken. I said it was superfluous, the vision